Because there's definitely a couple items that I've held on to, and I've been like,
Maybe this is useful.
I'm like, this is the head of a broken spear. And then the shaft of a broken spear. That's part of the same spear. And I'm like, is there something that these can be combined back together, or are these junk?
Like, I remember when I was playing Snowball, Snowball, who was an inquisitive rogue, and I gave him, like, feats that were, like, observant or aware or alert or stuff like that. He had a passive perception of, like, 23. Those have similarities between the two genres. But when we get down to the actual structure of what the game wants the player to do, I think that there are some big differences between them. Roll a d20. What is your attitude today?
-1?
Oh, wow. You're not really doing good for attitude. Okay.
I don't know. I don't have a d20 anywhere near me right now.
You rolled a 1, and you had a -2 to your attitude stat. So,
yeah.
Perfect. Great. Well, I'm feeling optimistic about this episode.
Good.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is Total Pebble Knockdown. I am Nathan.
And I am Alex with a -2 attitude.
With a -2 attitude. You know, I think it's going to be like that hack from Knights of the Old Republic 2, where if you get, like, the Wookiee's stat to such a negative degree, it actually backfires and it goes up to, like, 999.
We're going to pull a Gandhi. Got it.
Yep, perfect. You actually wanted to talk a little bit about CRPGs.
Yeah. CRPGs, a great term that is by no means in need of revisiting since we all use computers for them these days.
Yeah. Usually, though, when I think of CRPG, I'm thinking it is like a classic RPG, more in the classical style of RPGs.
The C in CRPG generally stands for computer role-playing game.
Oh, okay.
To denote the difference between a tabletop role-playing game, I guess.
Ah, okay.
We're not here to talk about the history of the terminology, however.
Yes.
I have been playing a bit of Baldur's Gate 3, however.
Okay.
Which, if you've read any of the, reviews or articles or anything about it so far.
Just that it seems to be doing quite well and people like it.
Very well.
Yes.
Very much so. It's, I think its highest concurrent player count was 800,000.
Mm-hmm. And it's been getting very good reviews, and it seems to be consistently up there for even Game of the Year territory right now.
Yeah, and even since launch, it has had over 1,000 bug fixes.
Yes. Yeah, they've been studying it very much. And, you know, the thing about it is, just my take is that I was excited for it only because, one, Baldur's Gate, I'm familiar with, like, Baldur's Gate 2, but then also, Larian is a very good studio, has produced some good stuff in the past, so.
Yeah, I do have Divinity Original Sin 2, for instance. I don't think I played the first one ever. I couldn't get into Divinity myself. I felt like that campaign's just very long-winded.
Oh, yeah, it can be. Even in the first one, I played the first one, there's definitely length to those areas. You spend a lot of time in each map.
So part of the thing is, I have a love-hate relationship with CRPGs. I've played a bit of Neverwinter Nights, the old CRPG, you know. I played probably a bit of Baldur's Gate back in the day and whatnot. I played Numenera, Tides of Numenera and Torment.
Yep, Torment.
You know?
Yep.
I have a game called Tyranny I played a bit of. And, let's see, Path of the Righteous for Pathfinder.
Yep.
From Owlcat, both their games. And then their new RPG they've been working on is Rogue Trader, which again, CRPG based on the Rogue Trader tabletop game. So I have we talk a bit about RPGs in general.
Sure.
On the show. And we have for the last several years, too many years to count. But I have a love-hate relationship with CRPGs myself, and the issue is I love RPGs, and I love D&D and other RPGs similar to that, WoD and 40k and Legend of the Five Rings, Pathfinder. I've played a ton.
Sure.
So I really love RPGs and the mechanics they bring to the table. The issue I have with CRPGs tends to come down to that of pacing.
I can see that. Yeah. Okay, so what's the problem with the pacing?
It's generally not good.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
I feel it's generally not good. And I will say right now, 40 hours into Baldur's Gate, by the time this episode comes out, I'll probably add another 15 hours into the game at least, I'm sure. What I will say Baldur's Gate does really well is the pacing is much better than most CRPGs I have played. And I think that comes down to the fact that most of it, especially dialogue, is narrated and spoken.
Okay, yeah, no, I know that especially the very old ones had a tendency to be completely text-based.
Right, and as much as I don't mind a lot of text in things, if you're gonna read it, it's a much better pacing experience when it's voice narrated, because then it gives you the tone, it gives you everything that you would need to know what they're talking about. It gives you the information in a nice, compact package.
Sure.
And it means it's not typically going to have vast paragraphs of dialogue, unless it's like a cutscene.
Sure.
And there are plenty of small cutscenes as well in Baldur's Gate. But it means any of the deep lore that you can find isn't just going to be a text dump.
Right.
At least not from the characters. And any of the text dumps that you do get are usually in the form of journals or books or things like that you can pick up and read along the way.
I thought you were going to talk about the combat mechanics, only because the combat mechanics for CRPGs have the same basic issue of like the tabletop RPGs, where we slow everything down to basically a turn-based strategy game where we have to then, you know, do everybody has to take a turn and you have to strategize with it, which can affect pacing.
That's not as bad as you would think, I don't think, with CRPGs, because generally these RPGs are turn-based.
Right.
You know? So the biggest issue with that is when you've got a large-scale combat and everything's suddenly taking a half hour for a combat.
This is true.
But in tabletop, that already happens.
Sure.
So
sure.
It's not as big of a deal breaker to me about the pacing with the combat as much as it is a pacing with the rest of it.
Right.
Because I'm already expecting it to be a turn-based combat, and actually Baldur's Gate, for instance, does a good job with that as well. Because people that would go the same time in combat, I believe, can act simultaneously.
Oh. Interesting.
Which is nice. I believe that's a thing. But they also made it so swarm mechanics, when there's a bunch of small creatures that all are very similar.
Sure.
In this case, I had an encounter with goblins. There were like 3 or 4 of them. They're all very similar, and they would move around at the same time. They just all took their turn at once. Instead of waiting for one to do an action, then the next, then the next, then the next. It just went, all of them are moving at once. They're doing their actions pretty much simultaneous.
Oh, that helps.
Which...
yeah,
it speeds up some of that combat just a bit, so that you don't have to go, great, waiting through 18 goblins, now I'm waiting through 3 different goblins, and then the 15 other ones that are going to act at once and hopefully don't murder me.
Sure. Well, that's helpful. Yeah, that's one of the advantages of, I guess, having the computer doing the work, is that we can do multiple operations at the same time without having to roll individually.
Yeah.
I think it's also kind of helpful, too, that in a computer RPG, you have one person, essentially you the player, that's controlling the entire group. So you have a strategy about how you're moving all of your characters, rather than the joy, but also the complexity of having multiple players during a tabletop session, where everybody has to kind of figure out where they're going to work inside of the strategy of a combat. So you have, a little bit more control over that as well. But I am kind of interested in how Baldur's Gate 3 addresses some of the pacing issues of previous games that are in that same genre. The text dumps are definitely an issue that I found, and maybe you can explain this to me because you've actually played the game. Inventory and UI, those usually ended up, for me, being a little bit... they slowed down the experience for me in a lot of CRPGs because of how they were developed.
Yeah, I will say the UI isn't terrible as
Okay.
far as like doing things with it. The inventory, for instance, though, I will agree, they definitely need to have something in there where you can do bulk processing of inventory. There
Sure.
is the option to add items to your wares, for instance. You can be like, oh, I don't really want this item, set it to my wares, and then you have a button at a vendor or a trader or whoever, and you can say sell wares, and it will just sell everything you marked as a ware all at once.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is that's handy.
Mhm.
But it would be nice to have a hotkey maybe, which isn't there at the moment. I'm not sure if you could set it in the keybinds, but if not, it'd be nice to have a hotkey where you can hold down like W and then click an item and mark it as your wares.
Yeah.
Then you can do that, or just an auto any of these items that I pick up that are technically like trash items, like silver platters and goblets and stuff like that,
Sure.
that are trash that sell for a decent amount of coin, though.
Sure.
It'd be nice to maybe say, hey, any silver goblets I pick up are wares. Automatically set them as wares.
Right. Yeah, it would be good to, I don't know if they denote it out, like, about wares or junk or whatever, so that when you go to a trader, because I've seen this system in a few other places, where, like, if you have certain goods, you can say, anything that's marked as wares goes here. Anything that's marked as junk, do you want to sell everything that's marked as junk? Or that is considered junk items in the game.
Right. The other thing would be nice if they denoted things that are actually junk as junk.
Yes.
Excuse me. Because there's definitely a couple items that I've held on to and I've been like,
maybe this is useful.
I'm like, this is the head of a broken spear. And then the shaft of a broken spear. That's part of the same spear. And I'm like, is there something that these can be combined back together, or are these junk?
Yeah.
A couple, I won't spoil anything, but I've got a couple brains in jars, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Can
I put them in something?
Can I do something with them, or are they junk?
Yeah.
Should I save them? Like, if they're actually junk, denote that as junk, but I understand maybe I'll hold on to this in case I can use them later situational appeal to it as well.
Yeah, I think that roots back to the tabletop RPG, though. It's like you could pick up spoons and forks, and there might not really be much functionality, but you never know. You could figure out something you could do. They put them into the game for a reason as an object.
Yeah,
so you
pretty
might
much.
as well use them for something.
I will say, not on the sense of pacing, not to do with the AI,
sure,
UI or anything like that, not to do with combat.
Sure.
Something on story. I'm not going to spoil anything here for the story for those of you who want to play Baldur's Gate 3. It's actually a really interesting start to it.
Sure.
I don't know if you know the start to it. It's interesting.
No,
but you've played some of the other Baldur's Gates, and I believe you played some of the Neverwinter Nights games?
Yes, I would have played one of the Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate 2. I've played some of the ones in the franchise, so yeah.
So I want you to make a guess. I assume you don't know a whole lot about the plot for Baldur's Gate 3 yet?
I really know nothing about the plot for Baldur's Gate 3.
Perfect. I want you to make a guess, knowing the Baldur's Gate series, knowing D&D, Forgotten Realms, and Neverwinter Nights games.
Mm-hmm. You want?
Yeah, at least a small bit.
Okay.
If you had to make a guess, what are some of the major plot points from the get-go?
Oh, yeah.
What would you say that the game would include?
I would assume that the game includes some big, almost godlike figure that is trying to find a magical device so that they can rule the world.
A godlike figure? I don't know about that. Okay, you're kind of off, but that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let me refine it for you, Nathan. If you had to pick two different races of enemies and important figures that are in the game,
okay,
as story plots,
yes.
Or what might you think are some major villainous enemies that you have to fight?
I'm going to guess that there are orcs, and I am going to guess that there are elves? Are elves and orcs against each other? Or
No.
illithids?
That's a lot better of a guess.
Mindflayers?
Alright, so Nathan, you've played some of the Neverwinter Nights. I would like nothing else for there to be a game based in Faerun or one of the other settings. That's fine. Faerun's pretty popular, so it's fine. I would love if there was a Baldur's Gate game or another game in the D&D universe that did not use the default of Mindflayers and Githyanki as their plot device.
Oh, yeah. I did see that there was a companion character that was Gith.
Yes,
yeah.
you get Lae'zel is pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah,
she's
okay, so
mean.
Yeah.
But, Githyanki, so that tracks.
Right. I do remember that the Mindflayers were annoying as hell as in Baldur's Gate 2.
Yeah, so the thing is, every game that we've played, even when I think I played Demon's Stone back a while ago too, and that one, apart from you meeting Dristord and you can have a half-drow character, that one also includes, one of the main plot points is a Githyanki. And a Mind Flayer.
Yeah.
And it's like, I understand these two don't like each other, but maybe you could also go with the Githzerai. If you're gonna go with the Gith, there's two different types of Gith, Githyanki and Githzerai.
Sure.
And they don't get along with each other, but they also mutually hate Mind Flayers.
I always figure that the overarching story is probably going to revolve around somebody who's trying to achieve a power unlike anything that they've ever found before. Maybe that's just because in Baldur's Gate 2, John Arenicus was like the first character that you meet and the major character that you have to deal with throughout the thing, and he's pretty much power mad for the...
Yeah.
For the majority
well, to be
of
fair,
it.
I'm still technically in Act 1, 40 hours in.
Oh, so we don't quite...
So I think that there's something along the lines of trying to do this big power grab, and I'm not going to spoil that for you.
Sure.
With stuff that's going on in a cult that you're dealing with.
Sure.
But not entirely sure what's there yet.
Sure.
I will also say that apparently the game has an astounding 170,000 different endings. I assume these are not all uniquely different true endings. I assume these are different ways you can end the game based on all the different things you do in the game.
Oh.
Because that would be a lot of hand-tailored. I assume every choice you make leads up to a different ending, essentially.
Yeah. Are they trying to be Chrono Trigger now?
I don't know, but it's a lot.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna guess that a lot of those are nuanced, very small changes that would happen.
I'm sure they deal
variations.
with, like, different characters you have with you that you've done things for. If you've killed this character or helped them, your relationships, all this other thing. How many times you've succeeded on a diplomacy check versus a persuasion or an intimidation check. Whether you help the cult or if you kill the cult.
Yep. Okay.
But it means that replaying it, I'm going to have a lot of different options I can take.
That's true. So, I guess the question that I would have is, do you think that the changes that they've made in Baldur's Gate 3, since you're playing that now, have been helpful in terms of the pacing and user experience over previous CRPGs that you've played?
Definitely. I think it's a pretty solid improvement. The pacing feels a lot better. The combat feels a bit more fluid, which is nice. It's definitely building off of the 5e material that it's going in there with by, 5e's done such a good job at being focused on such an ease of use for players that I think it actually builds a really good setting and world, well, not setting, I guess, but builds a good basis to have a CRPG in that system.
Sure. Very
so
good.
I think Larian's done a really good job adapting the 5e rule set into a very good game.
Yes.
Which is building off their engines with Divinity. And you can do a lot. Here's an example. I was standing there and I had this Duragar, the deep dwarves rather, who was like, hey, yeah, you need to get rid of that floating eye over there. It's a scrying orb.
Sure.
He's like, but do it discreetly because they watch through it. I'm like, okay, well, I look at it and you can examine enemies to see what their AC is, what their resistances and whatnot are, which you couldn't really do in tabletop as much. That's metagame knowledge at that point. But this is really helpful for planning what you're doing.
Sure.
So I look at the scrying orb and I go, okay, it's resistant to a lot of different damage. It takes none from psychic and poison. Okay. Resistant to slashing, takes half damage. Okay. I'm like, how can I kill this thing? really efficiently without getting spotted.
Right.
So I'm looking at it going, okay. I try a couple different things, and this will lead into our next topic. And then I reload the save because I don't kill it. So I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait a second, I've got a character who's got a really high strength. And I'm standing on a, little ledge thing, and down there is some lava and a very long drop. So I take my character, and I right-click on the orb, and I tell it to throw it off the cliff into the lava.
Yep.
And that kills it.
Yep.
The fire didn't kill it, the fall killed it, mostly.
Right.
But then a little bit later, in a fight that I did after this, same area, I'm in this little area, and then there's lava and more lava because it's underground. And so I take my character, I bring it over to the drow that I have to kill, and I pick him up and I throw him in the lava.
Yep.
And boy, does that hurt. That does 30 points of fire damage right off the bat.
Yeah, it's gonna do that.
Building off the divinity thing, environmental is really important, which is really nice because I can go, oh, I've got a bottle of grease. Throw it on the ground. Now I can light it on fire after you've fallen in it, which is really fun. And then, oh, there's acid on the ground. I have this bottle of water. I can just throw it on the ground to wash that acid away.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that Larian did with the Divinity series was how they used the environment and the different effects on it to you have a cloud of mist now, and if you electrify it, you have an electrical storm field, from that. It's just cool ways to interact. Oh, there's barrels of oil, and if I shoot them, now there's oil on the ground, and now if I light it on fire, I have a giant fire in the middle of everything.
Yeah, it's really fun being able to play with the environment that way, especially where D&D already has spells in place that you can do things like that as well.
Oh yeah. Your fireballs or firebolt spells specifically state that it will light objects on fire that are considered flammable. So
right, and I do have a character that has firebolt, and I usually give them my bottles of grease.
Yep. Shove some bottles of grease and then start throwing firebolts at it.
And it's my rogue, so I go, hey, I want you to throw a bottle, sneak over there, throw a bottle of grease on the ground, and then your next turn you're gonna firebolt.
Yep. Works.
So yeah.
Works.
So yeah, I think they do a pretty good job. I think you should definitely get it whenever you want to get a chance. Either wait for it to be on sale, like I was going to do, but I did not.
Sure.
But honestly, if you pay full price for it, I think you're gonna get your money's worth out of it.
I would think about it. I think that my one problem right now is I'm in the middle of a few different games, and next month Starfield comes out, so it might be a little while before I play Baldur's Gate 3.
I will say, I do hope, as much as I don't really want, tons of paid DLC necessarily.
Sure.
I would love to have more subclasses, builds, options for things like that. I would love to have, not a paid DLC, excuse me, but modding tools. Not for mods to make the game play differently. I would love a toolkit to build campaigns with.
Oh, sure.
Which I believe
maps and such.
Divinity has already.
It might. I don't think I played with any of it, but
I know the older Neverwinter Nights games definitely had stuff where you can build campaigns into it.
The older Neverwinter Nights games actually had that as one of the key selling points, is that you were able to build with a tool set. So
yes, and I would love a tool set like that to do this in Baldur's Gate 3, because honestly, this would be an amazing way to play D&D.
Yes.
Even though currently the level cap is 12 or 13.
Yeah. But, I can absolutely see a lot of people, especially fans of some of the, the streams and stuff like that, saying, oh, I really like the Critical Role campaign. Can I, can I reproduce that so people could actually play, a version
silly.
of that?
No, thank you. Play my own campaign.
You don't want to go to Tal'Dorei?
Just watch it.
Yeah, exactly. But I can see where they would want to do something like that. Yeah. Perfect.
So I believe they've said they're going to. Don't quote me on that. Someone else told me that. I didn't check in on it.
Okay. If we find out about it, we'll talk about it more. But yeah,
it sounds like it would be a really fun way to have it. I mean, it'd be more expensive, but if you're buying a book anyways, then the same price.
Sure,
really.
Absolutely.
But it would be really fun to be able to play a game, have a DM sit in, or make the campaign, and just let players go to town.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully they'll implement that, because I think CRPGs, especially because of their history, do lend themselves very well to it. And that'll be a lot of fun. It'd be interesting to see what people do with it, considering the modding communities for like Skyrim that are out there have been very motivated. So it'll be good to see it with an actual D&D licensed game. I guess the question that we would pass along to everybody else out there listening is, if you've played Baldur's Gate 3, what did you think about it, and what are your ideas about CRPGs in general? Do you prefer them to other forms of RPGs, or do you like them best and don't at me? So tell us in the comments down below. Something came across my purview yesterday that involved Baldur's Gate 3. And it was an article that I was actually given through a tweet from Josh Sawyer, who was responding to it. The article is from Polygon, and the title is, "It's time to accept save-scumming as the best way to play RPGs. Subhead, I absolutely will not take accountability for my actions," by Nicole Clark. And in this, she's talking about Baldur's Gate 3, where the first paragraph I'll just read to you so that you know what we're talking about. "My time playing Baldur's Gate 3 looks like this. Move my player character toward a quest point, have Shadowheart cast guidance, hit F5 to save, then try the conversation. Other times I'll take Asterion to a door, hit F5, then have him pick the lock. Who knows if there will be danger within." So these are basically save-scumming to make sure that we have success on random number generation.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I can say that I get it. I really do. You want to succeed, but you could also do this like you would do a Nuzlocke challenge in Pokemon, for instance, which is, if your Pokemon faints, you have to release them from the party.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you take them and you release them. They're no longer, you just get rid of them.
Sure.
So it's definitely ripe for players to give their own challenges to it to make it more like punishing, I guess. Not even really punishing, but make it so that there's self-imposed limitations. But they could definitely make a game mode where they have these like hardcore, you get one save file, for instance.
Yes. Yeah.
I will say, though, the game is really forgiving with a lot of the things. Inspiration is in the game, and unlike Inspiration, I believe, in tabletop version of D&D, which you don't get to... If you use Inspiration, you don't know if you succeed or fail before you use it, right? Or do you get to use Inspiration as a reroll? Be like, you failed that. Be like, can I use Inspiration to reroll that?
I believe that the rules might be changing in 1D&D, but my understanding is that, like, Inspiration... If you want to use Inspiration, you would get your advantage or something on a roll that you consider to be important, but you wouldn't know that you had not succeeded before you use it.
Right. So in this one, you get up to 4 Inspiration counters you can keep.
Mm-hmm.
So you only get 4, but it's handed out fairly often. Like, if you're doing something that your characters have in their background, as you would do in normal D&D.
Sure.
If the characters do something, or you as a player do something, and another character has it within their background that would go along with it, you get inspiration. It's not too hard to acquire. I generally have 4 ticks of it I can use, and you can go, cool, I want to make a roll. And it adds up all your bonuses. You can use guidance as a cantrip if you have someone in the party with it. If you have any other cantrips or spells on your repertoire that would be able to be cast, you can also have it so, like, friends or charm person, I can use those and get advantage on the roll. But I can only pick, like, one spell, so I can either pick guidance, or I can pick friends, or I can pick charm person.
Okay.
Unless out of combat, I go, cast guidance on my character, and then cast charm person on the person, then I can have both active.
Right.
But so I roll my dice, and then it adds up all the bonuses, and if I fail, it goes, do you want to use inspiration to roll it again? It's got a button, use inspiration, just re-roll, and it lets you. It doesn't, it's in there, it's a thing, it tells you you've got the inspiration, and it just lets you instantly re-roll and take the new results.
If that's not in 5e, I think that is something that they had proposed for 1D&D in the test material, so...
And I think that's fine. People want to succeed, but also failing can have its rewards too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not that punishing. Even if you, for instance, you go to pick a lock. The lock picking sets are given out like crazy. You find them, you steal them, you have a ton.
Yeah.
I have like 35 on my character.
Yeah.
So even if I fail picking a lock with Astron, I go, I'm not going to use inspiration, try again with another lockpick.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's understandable. The way I heard about this, though, was that Josh Sawyer had responded to it, and I thought that his response was really interesting. If you don't know who Josh Sawyer is, he's worked for Obsidian for a long time. He was the game director or the studio design director for the Pillars of Eternity series, Icewind Dale series, Fallout New Vegas, and he's the director of Pentiment. So he's coming from that school of thought, and his response was, counterpoint, if designers do not like save-scumming, not a given, they should design their mechanics to not incentivize save-scumming. Which I thought was very interesting. No, yeah, I thought that was a very interesting thing, especially considering that he worked on New Vegas. Because if you remember, in New Vegas, they changed up a lot of how the dialogue worked from Fallout 3. Because in Fallout 3, you had a percentage chance to succeed on different charisma or skill checks when you were in speech. It would say, like, oh, yeah, well, based on your stat, you have, like, a 52% chance of having this succeed, even with Colonel Autumn at the end. You can basically say, screw it, I'm dead, like, basically. But in New Vegas, what they did is they just said, you need to hit this threshold of a speech skill, or a barter skill, or whatever, or you have to have these perks. If you do, you can use this dialogue option. Otherwise, it's just not available to you. Straight up and down.
Yeah, but I feel like doing that wouldn't be very D&D,
No.
You can say what you want. Whether it's useful, whether it's success or fail is up to your character and what you roll. So in this instance, I have the option to say, just use dialogue, or I can do persuasion, or I can do intimidation.
Sure.
I usually have those options. And so if you look at it, it's got brackets persuasion and brackets intimidation. And both those are very similar skills using charisma. But in the instance of this, you hover over it where it says persuasion, and it will tell you off to the left-hand side. It'll go, you have a bonus from your skill, your proficiency with the skill. You've got 1d4 from guidance, and you've got a +3 from like charisma or something like that. And it tells you on the side. Sure. These are your bonuses to the skill check you're trying to use. And if you have if you don't have anything, it's like wisdom. You have a +1 from wisdom. And then it's like, all right, what do I have the best bonuses in? It's like, I guess I'll go with this option because I've got the better bonuses, unless you're trying to play true to your character or true to a specific mindset where it's like, oh, I'd rather persuade them than intimidate them.
Right.
But, it gives you the breakdown on the side. It's not like, oh, it doesn't tell you the DC on the side. Okay. It's not going to tell you the difficulty class, but I don't think it should.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't discourage save scumming, I don't think it should tell you the DC on the side. You're choosing to make your roll and your skill check based on what you think your character should do and what you think you've got the best outcome for. But if it told you the DC as well, you'd go, oh, this has the lowest DC, I'm just going to go for that.
No, I understand. In D&D fashion, you don't, like, one, it's a skill check, so you would roll for it, and there is a random number generation to it, but it's also, you don't tell the players how difficult the lock is to pick.
Yeah, not typically, unless it's way out of their league, but then you can describe it in other ways as well.
Right, exactly, but the hard numbers of it don't necessarily come into play. One of the other things that I've seen that kind of helps, especially on that level, and I'll go back to like the Fallout series, or actually I'm playing Elix 2, and it does something very similar to this. If you have locks or hacking or anything like that you need to do, one, there's certain levels of ability that you have to pass in order to do that, but then also there's an actual mini game to it to pick the lock, so there is some skill related to it that isn't really based on RNG so much, because you're actively doing the skill. But that's not really very D&D related, which I think is just, it's a trapping of the game and the system that Baldur's Gate 3 is based on, but I think that's what people want. I don't really necessarily think that it's a problem with, creating a game that affords itself to save scumming if you want to do that. It's more that that's kind of what people expect from a D&D game, that it's going to have those mechanics. I think the one problem is that because we do work on save files and it's on a computer, you do this thing that you normally can't do in Dungeons & Dragons, which is you reload your game. So I think that there is this kind of dichotomy. You want the game that it's based on to have some relevance to, the game that you're creating. So you're creating a Baldur's Gate 3, and there are mechanics in it that you're basing off of Dungeons & Dragons, and so I want to have random number generation and skill checks and all of these things because that's what people expect. There is one problem, of course, to it, which is that in a real D&D game, you don't reload saves. It just keeps going. And in a CRPG, you absolutely can. You absolutely can.
I will say there is a single caveat to that, which I would, say is annoying.
Sure.
And save-scumming it sometimes is necessary, I want to say, because it feels a little cheated otherwise. And that is perception checks. You don't roll for them.
Yeah, okay.
They are using your passive perception, I think, but kind of not even passive. You don't get to roll it yourself. The game rolls it. And I understand that rolling a perception check every time you would have to make one in the game would be a lot, because there are a lot of them you make just for noticing something out in the wild or a button. But it's kind of disheartening when you walk into a location and then see perception failed, perception failed, perception failed, perception failed. Because generally speaking, you don't get to re-roll a perception check in D&D.
Sure.
And I don't think you get to redo it in Baldur's Gate as well. So it's like, I just failed something, there's something here, and now I want to see what's here.
That's what I was thinking, is that it would be better to just hide that, because then it's more rewarding when you do uncover something. You don't know it's there.
I feel like if they're going to do that, it could be, you don't show it, but then if you come back, you make another roll.
Oh, sure.
Because, if you visit the same location, you might notice it later, but not the first time. Because you just might be paying more attention.
Sure.
Like, if you go to the same store every day, and they change something, you might not notice for a few days.
Sure.
Because you don't look. So I don't know if that's a thing, if you go back to the area that was it there, if you can do another check or not. But I will say, it is definitely, I go, wait, why did I just fail a bunch of perception checks?
Yeah.
And it's like, now I want to reload to see what the heck I missed.
Yeah.
Can I succeed this? I'll reload the game a couple times. But I can understand where, like, if players, if people want to play the game as a one save, no save scumming, that, you can. You can make that a thing you do.
We have a tendency to overlook passive perception anyway, which is kind of a shame. Like, I remember when I was playing Snowball, who was an inquisitive rogue, and I gave him like feats that were like observant or aware or alert or stuff like that. He had a passive perception of like 23. So, so really, if we ever bothered to like look at passive perception for most things, he would have instantly seen most things that came into his purview. But I thought that it was just a very interesting point that Josh Sawyer was making about, like, sometimes the idea of save-scumming is because of the way that it was designed, and if you don't want to lend your game to it, it might be a design choice that you make. I don't necessarily think Larian is wrong to have done this way, because they're trying to make they're making a game based on Dungeons and Dragons, and this does happen. But you know, if you're not basing it off of D&D and you are worried about players, you know, constantly reloading because of random chance, maybe consider that when you're doing the game mechanics.
Yeah, or just consider that you added, like, they already have 3 difficulty modes, which are story, balanced, and then like tactician.
Sure.
Which are less focused on combat, kind of middle ground, and then more focused on combat, being more, you know, tactical. Maybe make another option for it where it's turn off the ability to do quick saves.
Yeah.
That or like you can only
so many save files.
Yeah, you can't reload a save at all. You know, you can reload it if you load the game, but maybe make it so you just can't reload. It's basically the Iron Man mode. It's you get one save file, and if you die, you die. Hardcore mode. Yeah,
hardcore mode. Yeah. The most recent one I'm not necessarily proud of, but I was just trying to get through some portion of the game. I had a case where I did this, where I would reload, and it was, God, what was it called? Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town. I tried that for a minute, and there's this race that you go to where you can you can put money down and bet on one of the horses to win the race, and then you get a bunch of coins if you win. And the first time I went in and I didn't really have coins, like I didn't know that this was a thing that you could do, but I put a little bit of money down and I didn't win, and I noticed that you could do multiple races, and I went back. I was like, okay, well, this time I'm actually going to bring coins, because I didn't know that was like a thing that we do. And I went, and I didn't win the second time, but I kept noticing that it was like the horse on the bottom kept winning with like 7-1 odds on it. And I was like, well, now I got to see. So I reloaded again, and I just got as many coins as I could, and I like put them all on the horse that was in the bottom of the corner of the screen. Same horse that keeps winning. And I did. And it won, and I got all of these coins that I could buy a bunch of really valuable stuff for, and made a ton of money. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll take this one. But most of the time I try to avoid it. But I do find myself, especially in games where I keep dying continuously, I'm more frequent with the number of times that I save, so I don't have to go back and do progress over and over again.
Right.
Upon death. So there's definitely a argument from that. But, you know, I thought it was an interesting conversation about the act of just competitively restarting to get the best result on randomization. And whether it's a good idea, a bad idea, or really if it has a design component to it, which I would say you could say there's a design component.
There's definitely also been points in the game where I've had to take and basically save scum through combat. And not like through the middle of combat, but like saving right before I initiate combat and seeing the different ways I can get into combat in my favor. Not because I'm trying to cheese the system, but because they are potentially difficult fights.
Yeah.
I've had a couple fights with this like a hobgoblin, and he would just come over and like knock out my fighter in like 1-2 hits. Like he'd get one hit and then get a second hit, and then he would rage, and I'd be like, well, that's the person I had who could do the most damage, and I've got like 5 goblins plus this guy on me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, guess I'm reloading the save and trying that again.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
But at that point, it's just saving time between the point at which I decide to reload a save,
Sure.
and me having to reload a save when he kills all of my party members later.
Yep.
You know? Because I got the weapon that he had, which is like, oh, that's how he was able to do it. It's a good weapon.
Oh,
but I'm just like, there's been a couple boss fights, not even boss fights, but like mini boss fights like that, where it's like, all right, this room is not to my advantage. How can I get a leg up on this and take care of that?
Yeah.
You know? And one of them, I was like, I had some ogres that I could call in for reinforcements.
Sure.
And I called them in. I'm like, cool, they're helping mop the floor with these guys. And I'm like, oh, but now they're fighting my other NPC who I need to live. Because he's a bear right now.
Oh, yeah, you might...
There's a druid in...
Yeah.
There's a druid in bear form. I'm like, there needs to be something there where this guy's with me and they don't attack him, but now I can't use them in combat because they're going to attack this guy. So I've got to try that again, otherwise this druid dies. Would it be interesting, I think, to play the game as a no quick save, no quick load kind of deal? Just one save file, essentially, and go through it? Like, no saves coming your way through it? Definitely. That would be a live with the consequences you get, you know? Maybe I'll do that at some point. But for now, I am loading saves as I need to.
I do get the impression from some of the responses from this particular post that there are a few places in Baldur's Gate 3 that might have some very big, long-range complications from fairly innocuous conversations that you might have had that lead to some very big things and might make people want to resave, but at the same time, I don't know. I think that it's okay if things don't go exactly according to plan. It does also make for an interesting story that you might also enjoy. What are folks' thoughts on save-scumming, and is it a design issue, or is it really more of a player-to-player issue? I would say...
Player-to-player.
Hot take, yeah. Let us know in the comments down below. Join us over on Discord if you want to really fight us on it, I guess. Although I don't know if we really have a strong opinion either way. But, yeah, check us out there. We'll have a conversation. Moving away from the CRPGs now, I wanted to expand upon something that we talked about on the last episode, which was when I talked about Metroidvanias. And,
yes, you love them.
I do, except of course for the one that I talked about on that particular episode. For me, Metroidvanias are up there among my all-time favorites, probably along with, like the epic RPGs, which I'm usually very fond with, cozy games, and immersive sims, which are one of my all-time favorites, probably at the top. But Metroidvanias, I think, are really interesting because they have such a very long lineage, as many people are aware, because I've said it so many times that it's getting to be a dead horse that I'm beating, but that I have a very wishy-washy, very love-hate relationship when it comes to Souls games.
Yes, as is my relationship with most CRPGs. We're just doing a love-hate show.
We're doing a love-hate show again. Yeah, this is terrific. This is just for the fans. Souls-like games do share some similarities to Metroidvanias. I thought that it would be kind of useful to talk a little bit about things that Metroidvanias do that Souls-likes typically don't, or don't focus on.
Fun?
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed, having played several entries in these genres, is that a Souls-like will usually frame itself as being an interconnected world where you unlock the ability to go from one area to another, but you do so by mostly going through boss battles or challenges that are combat related, so that you are able to get to a point where you unlock the ability to go back to previous areas that you had been to. That there is a challenge that you have to go to, that there is a humility that you have to deal with, that you have to get better at. In order to overcome a challenge.
Like it's the boss fight.
Yeah.
But in Metroidvania, it's typically not a boss fight. It's typically some item or upgrade you have to get.
Exactly. There's a point in Metroidvanias where they will get you into a situation. I just played Fist, actually, which is one of those very titles. that will get you into a situation that you actually can't get out of until you collect and upgrade an item that allows you to do something that you previously couldn't do.
Yeah,
So,
that's the same kind of deal that Zelda usually does too.
yeah, and it's kind of interesting because also Koji Igarashi, when he talked about creating Bloodstained, he said specifically that Zelda Link to the Past was his biggest inspiration for that, not Metroids, not Castlevanias, that it was Zelda specifically. And I can see that because the structure is very similar even there. What they do is they get you into a situation where you then have to get some kind of an upgrade that allows you to do something that you previously could not do. And then they let you use that in order to get out of the situation that you are now in. And then, when they do get you to some kind of a boss battle or challenge, it's focused on using the new skill that you got to help you through that situation.
Right.
But then, you get to use that to go back to previous areas and uncover secrets and explore more of the world that you previously couldn't get to. I think that what's really interesting is that a Metroidvania focuses far more on exploration than Souls games do, where Souls games are very focused on the challenge of the game to get you over these challenges, which are these big, dangerous areas, bosses, enemies, environmental hazards that keep coming at you continuously that you need to overcome and get more powerful so that you can move forward. And so they still have the interconnected world, but the interconnected world is based on your ability to overcome that challenge. Metroidvanias are focused on keeping you, engaged with getting new skills that you then use to overcome the challenge and get to new areas that you previously couldn't get to. And I guess that just interests me more because it has this feeling of progression where you're uncovering the world because you are understanding things by way of new abilities and tools that they're giving you, which is just not the same focus. I think that there's just much more focus on exploration in Metroidvania titles. There's a bit of crossover here. As you probably know, there's a lot of games that will lend themselves to having upgrades, like Darksiders 3 is the first one that comes to mind. In that, Fury gets new forms that she can then use in order to access new areas, but it also still has the same kind of Souls formula where I die, my currency gets left on the ground, I have to go through a challenge to get there. And so these get integrated occasionally, but I think it is really the main difference between whether it is going to be a challenge that is put in front of me so that I can advance, or that I am getting tools that then those challenges help inform because I have gotten those new tools. I think that's the big difference. The exploration elements, I think, are also a big difference, and that the big similarity between them is the interconnected worlds, these different biomes and being able to go between them. But how you access that and how they interconnect is very different between Souls-likes and Metroidvanias. I don't know if you've played a lot of like the Metroidvania style titles. I know you've tried your hand at a couple of the Souls-likes, but
not so much.
Okay.
Side-scrollers are typically not my deal, and a lot of the Metroidvania tend to be side-scrollers.
There are examples of the 3D like obviously Metroid Prime was the 3D iteration, and like
there's definitely some, but the majority I see.
Yeah.
I think the one I was a little bit curious about, but have not played and haven't really thought about it since, was actually Tunic.
Oh, Tunic. See, it's interesting you bring up Tunic, because Tunic is one of those games that takes a lot from the Souls kind of franchise. The way that it does combat, because it does want to do tactical combat.
Sure.
And it also does the thing where, all of your, light or whatever they're collecting in the game gets dropped on the ground and you go back to checkpoints and stuff. And it can be very difficult in that regard, and there are, like, boss battles and boss fights and stuff like that.
Sure.
But you do also get some tools, and you get abilities and knowledge throughout the course of the game that lend itself a little bit more to Metroidvania. And I think that the style and aesthetic made people think of, like, Zelda. Like, it's a fox.
Have you played
Zelda.
Tunic?
I have played Tunic, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know from hearing about it, it was very much in the way of the entire game is more so about the knowledge you get and understanding the systems in the game and unlocking the secrets in the game to learn how to do things.
One of the most interesting things about Tunic is that instead of just giving you a bunch of stuff, they more or less focus on the idea that there's a language that you do not understand, and you get these words, you learn the translation of different words, and by translating these, you now understand better how to play the game and also the game world. That was the best part of it.
So as I understood, it was mostly exploration. Exploration and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, there are exploration elements to it. The reason why I stopped playing, though, is that it gets to a point where it is much more focused on getting over these, like, hell map kind of places where there's just, like, here's, like, 5 slime creatures that will just try to gobble you up, and here's a few, barrel traps that are going to set on fire if you get too close to them, and there are these places where it felt like I was supposed to understand the thing, where maybe if I did have, style where I'm trying to learn a new mechanic, or I had that new mechanic in front of me, I would have been better prepped for it. There's a bridge. It always happens with bridges in Souls-likes, it feels like, but there's this log that you have to cross to get to this new area, and there's a swordsman with a shield on the log, and he doesn't fall off, obviously. But, like, the second you try to attack him, like, the shield comes up, boing, and your little tunic doesn't do anything. And then when he hits you, you, like, fall off the log, and you die.
So the trick is you need to roll the log.
Apparently, you need to try to figure out a way to roll the log. I do not have the...
That's my guess.
Yeah, there's probably a way to do it. I don't know. I don't know. But that is one of those interesting cases where... For me, that felt far more like a Souls-like, but in the 2D5 art style, or the 2.5D art style, that made it look a little bit more like a Zelda kind of game. It's when it gets into the we have to get good at the combat element where it lost me a bit from that aspect. Your typical Zelda game is, I get my chain shot. Now all of these little places where there were chain shot holes that I've seen around, I can actually access. That wonder and discovery that you usually feel, where at the beginning of the game, it looks like there's something up on top of that cliff, but I can't get onto that cliff right now, and I don't know what all of these little, like, dots in the sky are until you get the right tool, and then go, oh, this is how I get to that place that I saw 5 hours ago back at the starting area.
Now I've got to retrace my steps and go all the way back to find out what was there.
Now I got to retrace my steps. Yes, and in a lot of them, that's exactly what I end up doing. That is similar in Souls-likes. You'll get more powerful, you will upgrade your stats, and you will get better weapons, and that will allow you to get through the challenge, but the challenge is mostly combat-based. The challenge is trying to overcome the difficulty of an area and not uncover the tools that you need in order to access the area. And I find that to be one of the main differences. And when I find Metroidvanias so engaging and interesting, it's because the best among them will start you off and you really have nothing at all to speak of. But they'll give you these illusions or places that look like you can access them, but you can't do it yet. And the uncovering of the tools you need in order to go back and access them is one of the most fun, engaging things that helps with pacing and exploration and engaging with the game world that I have seen in gaming, bar none. Like, it's just one of the best ways to where you'll see something and say, I don't know how to get there, but I know that by the time I get to the end of the game, I will have the ability to do so. And then they deliver on it afterward. And it's not because I don't know how to combat good. It's because the tools are going to present themselves to me, and I will be able to get someplace that I normally couldn't, and uncover a secret in the world that I normally wouldn't be able to yet. So, I find that that's a really interesting design philosophy difference, and it's one of the reasons why there are Souls-likes that I do like and that I will play, and I find interesting because the interconnectedness of the world and the idea of overcoming a challenge and being able to loop back to previous areas and, you know, upgrades and new ways to play the game, those have similarities between the two genres. But when we get down to the actual structure of what the game wants the player to do, I think that there are some big differences between them. Some that I do like, and some that I really don't. I wanted to just kind of put that out there as one of the big reasons why I have a different relationship between a couple genres, and why I think of the different genres the way I do. So you haven't played a lot of Metroidvanias. You have played a couple of the Souls games. I'm wondering if I'm talking out of my ass here about, like, the nature of Souls games and how those play.
Probably not. I mean, if that's your take on it, then I don't think it's talking out of your ass. That's how you feel about them.
Perfect.
Honestly,
I love when I talk about them. Yes.
Like, I remember fondly enjoying Castlevania Curse of Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I played that, and that one was not quite the same thing as a Metroidvania because it was a newer Castlevania, which kind of moved out of the realm of the typical Metroidvania side-scrolly type deal. But that one, I guess, was still in the vein of you get new tools to do things with to overcome it, but it was still like an action hack and slashy game.
Sure.
You know, Castlevania Curse of Darkness I enjoyed, but again, that was more in the PS2 era of puzzles and fighting, and you got your little demons you summoned.
Sure.
Who each had abilities to help you as tools to overcome challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, but it feels like a different type of game than what you've been describing. So.
Yeah, exactly.
I did play Simon's Quest back in the day on NES, which would probably be more akin to a Metroidvania.
Whoa. Yeah.
Or a classic Castlevania, actually, because it was like one of the first ones. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I did enjoy that, but I don't have quite the nostalgia for those types of games that would make it so I really enjoy them these days.
Yeah, and the thing is that I don't mind 2D side-scrolly games. Like, I don't mind that genre. I think it's just interesting from a perspective standpoint to see the game world in that way.
I generally don't care for them as much. We've come to such a point in technology where me looking at the graphics of 2D and whatnot, and sprites, I'm just like, this doesn't do it for me quite the same.
I will also say, though, that there are several examples of Souls-likes that are using that same 2D art style, the side-scrolling art style, because I've played Salt and Sanctuary, and I've played Ghost Song, and, oh god, what was the other one that they did that for?
Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to think. Hollow Knight's, again, one of those ones that I think people usually think of as a Metroidvania, maybe because of the art style, but it is very much a Souls-like when you play it. Yeah. It very much is. So anyway, I guess I'm wondering how other people feel, if there are some other fundamental differences between Souls-likes and Metroidvanias that I'm not talking about here, and if you see games that do a good job of integrating the different concepts together, because I'm always looking for ones that have done a good job of that. Alex, if folks out there would want to hear more of the mindless ramblings of of us, where could they go on the internet?
Anywhere insane people are welcomed.
The
you
internet.
can find more of what we do over at totalpebbleknockdown.com.
Yeah. Anywhere that the insane people are is just called the internet.
That's true.
Yeah. You can find all the episodes of this show. You can find Titanium Mine. You can find Creatures over there. And you can also click on our Patreon banner. When you do so, you can check out some of the stuff that gets left on the cutting room floor. And you can also find early releases of these episodes in their entirety. Feel free to check us out on every podcast app known to mankind. This is a podcast, not just a video series. And please rate and review and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And you can also find us on social media. I am at Titanium.
I am at EXP Limited. Our show is at Pebble Knockdown, and I believe our website is, for these social media addresses is now known as X.
Yes.
But it's still twitter.com, so
Yeah, it's still twitter.com. But yeah, X us in the I don't even know what it is. Oh, no, I do know. I do. It's not tweets and retweets now. It's posts and reposts.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Is that actually what it is?
Yeah.
Did they change it?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Well, to be fair, Elon has owned the website
for X,
the domain for X for years.
Oh, yeah.
So he finally, wanted to do something with it now that he has however much he paid for Twitter.
This is like, the third time he's tried to make X happen? It's it's fast. I keep wanting to say, Elon, stop trying to make fetch happen. It won't happen.
Billionaires and their billionaire toys.
It's good times.
Twitter is the toy.
Twitter is a toy. Well, you can't, it's X now, so it's not...
Yeah, well, he ruined it.
Yes. Sorry. From just a branding standpoint, folks, it's not great. But, anyway.
Should have just sold X to OnlyFans, called it a day.
X us in the comments. Press X to pay respects. If you... Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.